Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, your Halloween travel podcast.
Is this a seat that taken? Oh, that's pretty good vampire, I thought.
It's a little on the nose.
What's your vampire sound like that's so great?
He's just modern, like a modern guy, you know?
He just sounds like you. You're pretty pale. You could pass for a vampire. I don't know. You're not as well dressed as a vampire. And I'm not talking about the Twilight vampires. I'm talking about classic Dracula vampires.
I think like Interview with the Vampire, like Plantation South, Tom Cruise, and that's sort of my yeah.
Plantation South. I'll be talking about some sites in the South in this episode, Ryan, because
South is haunted.
We're talking about haunted places in honor of Halloween.
It is Halloween today, the 31st.
Happy Halloween, Ryan.
Happy Halloween.
Now, do you have a costume?
I'm going as a Brooklynite who has a podcast. It's a very specific
Every
look.
Brooklynite. So I'm not personally dressing up, but my children are dressing up, and their grandmother, my mother, is a great costume maker. And last year spent endless hours making Charlie a sheep costume. She hand glued individually 500 different cotton balls onto a black suit, and it looked fantastic. It was on Charlie for about 20 seconds. He started crying so hard that we would do anything to stop the tantrum. And so we took it off. So this year we decided to keep it, very Charlie friendly. So he's going to be a construction worker, which is what he wants to be. But then Penny, who's too young to have an opinion yet, she's going to be a traffic cone.
I love that.
Pretty cute. I already
travel related,
yeah, pretty cute. So big thanks to Nana Schmidt on the Halloween. I grew up, we always had we had a big box of costumes from all the previous years that she had sewed, and you take it out a few times a year and dress up. Yeah, no, the costume box was something that we had too. Maybe the most famous Halloween story in the Schmidt household. Now, I have 3 older brothers, right?
Yes.
And before I was born, she once did a theme where all 3 of them were Wizard of Oz characters. Okay.
Ooh, I love themes.
So my oldest brother, Rob, was the Scarecrow. And then Ryan, the next oldest, he was the Lion. And then Brendan, who was a baby, was Dorothy. She didn't even do Tin Man. She did Dorothy.
Wow. I know. Yeah.
I mean, and for what it's worth, hold this idea till I come along. I think I'd be a killer Dorothy.
Yeah, you would have insisted.
When I walk down the street, people are always saying, look at that Dorothy.
They do in Provincetown, the gay sort of hotspot. They do all the houses that people go. They all dress up in kind of themed costumes for the parties. So you have whole houses go as like, the YMCA guys, the Village People. You've got it all. So that's always one of my favorite. That's my favorite costume time.
And Ryan, you got home safely to New York after our big first foray into traveling together to Richmond, right?
Yeah, and there's a picture of us up on the old Instagram, smiling at whose grave is that?
That's James Monroe's grave.
Monroe's grave is very fancy.
One of the more beautiful graves I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. That's a way to go out.
It almost looks like a chapel meets a greenhouse.
Yeah, it's sort of like an art piece.
It's absolutely lovely. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go to the pod's Instagram at OOOpodcast.com. At OOO podcast, that like at Out of Office podcast, 3 O's.
We'll link to it in the show notes.
Make it nice and easy for you. But Ryan, now we're going to have a Richmond episode. We're going to have a Richmond episode in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. So you and I will tell the story of Richmond, which is quite a story.
The story of Richmond. But also we're going to be telling about the story of us, the story of tonight. We're going to be telling the story about Ryan and Kiernan's first big adventure together, despite 4 years of having a travel podcast and over a decade of friendship.
Yeah, no, it was a really fun weekend. It was good to, you're good to travel with, Kieran.
I would say the same about you, Ryan. I had a good feeling about it. We've done lots of other stuff together. We've spent a lot of time together. So I think we went in eyes open. And, maybe the key was separate hotel rooms. Hell, we did separate hotels. Close, though. We could get to each other if we needed to.
Yeah. But, I love my Best Western breakfast.
Yeah,
my Holiday Inn breakfast.
I also, I thought we were very adult when I wanted to go and do something in the morning and you weren't that into it. It was like, great, we'll meet at 10 and let me go do the miserable thing you don't want to do. I'll do it myself.
Yeah. Well, is that Andrew Jackson's house? Oh, no, go to the bakery at 9 a.m.
The bakery at 9 a.m., the wood-fired bakery, which I will most certainly, one of the best things I ate in Richmond. And, you're going to have to tune into that episode to hear the name of it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to hear about it because I didn't go.
Now, I'm trying to think, Richmond, did we get, just to get us back into the spooky spirit here, did we get any good ghost stories in Richmond?
So we got a ghost story at the Confederate White House. And so you remember,
of course.
Yeah, you remember we were there with a guy who was like fresh out of college football,
fresh out of the fraternity. Yeah.
And he was there with his dad, and we walked.
He had the West Virginia on his fleece.
Yeah, guy was in pretty good shape.
Really great. We talked about that a lot.
And so we're going through the Confederate White House. People are asking questions about.
And just to be clear, the Confederate White House was in the capital, which was Richmond of the Confederacy during the Civil War. This is where Jefferson Davis lived and did a lot of his work and planning as the president of the Confederacy.
Exactly. So it was Jefferson Davis's house. He lived there with his family during the entirety of the Civil War. And so we get through this whole, people are asking all these questions. And at the very end, the guide, the docent, he says, anybody have any final questions before, we wrap today? And sure enough, the fraternity brother said, any ghosts around here?
You ever see any ghosts?
And the answer was no. They hadn't seen any ghosts the property. But
and the docent said he didn't believe in ghosts, but that he did wish that he had seen one.
Yes. The docent was quick to say that he didn't believe in ghosts, but he then did tell us a ghost story connected to the house.
Great story.
It's a classic story.
Well,
so
I said, listen, why don't we kick it off right here? Even before takeoff, we'll get in the spooky mood. Then we'll take off. Then we'll hit the official list.
Oh my gosh. I love this. This was just a preview take. This is like one of those aborted takeoffs.
I mean, it's oh, the landing gear is not holding, everybody. Come back down.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's rare for me, a rule follower, to let the main subject of the show leak up. But I'm comfortable here because it's part of the Richmond story. It's not falling into the spooky category.
Yeah, so April 30th, 1864, at the Confederate White House, Jefferson Davis is living there with his family, and his 5-year-old son, whose name was Joseph Davis, which is my middle name, Joseph, which is even spookier,
because your last name is Davis.
Exactly. Sad story, fell off, the 5-year-old son of Jefferson Davis falls off the porch.
Which was 15 feet above the ground.
Yeah, it was quite a porch. And so he falls off and he dies. The war ends not too many years later. But what happens is the porch is removed from the house, and apparently it was a nice porch. And so it gets shipped somewhere, and I don't remember where. Someplace spooky though, right?
Well, he wasn't even sure that this had happened, but the story is that the railing and the porch had been removed and shipped off and bought by somebody in another house.
Right. So this other house, and ever since that day, the people who have owned the other house, have seen young Joseph Davis falling off of that balcony over and over again.
So they thought they were getting a railing, and they got a ghost boy.
Yeah, the ghost boy attached to the railing. So This is this is certainly, we don't know where that railing is, so you can visit it, but you can visit.
We tried to find out.
Yeah, I've been Googling.
The docent even said they weren't sure this is well, obviously this ghost part's not a true story, but he didn't even know that the railing being removed was a real story.
Yeah, but it's a good story because I can just imagine little Joseph Davis just going, "Hey, where's this porch going?" Grabbing on and
I'm holding on to the railing.
I'm holding on to this and being like, "Whoa."
Also funny he would go with the railing, the very thing that did not stop him from going over. But maybe that's why you choose to haunt something. I don't know.
Well, it's, he's like, anything's better than an eternity in Richmond.
Stop. We love Richmond. What are you talking about?
No, we enjoyed Richmond.
We had a wonderful time in Richmond.
It's true.
Don't besmirch it. But Ryan, while we're in the spooky ghost children mood, I think it's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
Now, Ryan, before we get into our list, you and I have each brought a couple of places that we've visited that are renowned for being haunted. Do you believe in haunting? Do you believe in ghosts?
No, I don't. I don't believe in ghosts.
I don't either. And it's not even like I kind of believe. Like when I've stayed in haunted hotels, like one thing that's not on my list is the Stanley Hotel in Colorado where I stayed.
Right.
Talked about it on a previous episode. This is famously the Shining Hotel. And, it didn't even cross my mind that I could potentially be haunted. Didn't bother me at all.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't love the dark though, But,
see, I like the dark.
I like the light. So I've stayed in hotels that are like really spooky, like the Hotel Genevieve in Mexico City. I stayed at the hotel I stayed at in Ascension, like these old 1910 hotels that have been sort of remodeled, but not really. And they were really grand, and now they're definitely haunted.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. That sounds like the Haunted Mansion at Disney World.
It's very much, so maybe it's just the ghost of what's going on in that hotel over the last 120 years. But
so we're probably able to enjoy these haunted, and I put that in parentheses, places a little bit more because we're not actually scared.
No, not actually scared.
And so, Ryan, do you have one that you want to kick us off with? A famously haunted place to visit if you're looking for a Halloween fright?
Yeah, so I'm going to kick us off with something that is a short drive from New York City. And this was a house that I visited during the pandemic. It's not open for tours, but many people go and they take pictures outside. And this is a house in Haverstraw, New York. That was the basis.
That's because the farmers used to go there, and then when they got to the market, somebody would say, "You having straw?" Yeah, I got a bunch of straw back here in the truck. Help me get it down.
That is likely how that name came to be. But this house was the basis for this famous Edward Hopper painting called "House by the Railroad," and Alfred Hitchcock was a big fan of that painting, and he used that painting to base the house in his 1960 film Psycho. So this house has inspired both Hopper, also Hitchcock, and then additionally the Addams family, the original mansion that they live in the series, also based on this painting of this house. So it is not a house itself that is haunted, but it's a house that I think has inspired, when people look at it, a lot of haunting. And it fell into disrepair, back in the 60s and 70s, but was restored in the early aughts, and it's really beautiful. Old, I mean, when you look at it, you're going to think, oh, wow, that looks a lot like the Psycho house. It's a little brighter now, and I'll post a picture on the old Instagram, but it's a pretty house, and it's on a road that's very highly traveled. So I almost got hit by a car taking a picture of it. So just be careful there. But check out the link in the show notes, because you can see both the house and the painting by Hopper and Hitchcock standing in front of his version of the mansion.
Terrific. I love that one.
Thank you. And another side note, something I learned was, did you ever watch the Psycho Bates Motel reboot on TV? No. I'm not a horror movie or TV guy. I've seen almost nothing. It's kind of fun. It's campy, but it's fun. And they rebuilt that house and they filmed for 3 seasons in Canada. And then I read that they tore it down. And again, I just don't understand why they tear this stuff down. That would have been like something people would have come to see in Vancouver when they were there. So yeah, this remains the one in Haverstraw, New York. This is the one that you can go see.
Very cool.
So Kiernan, what's your first haunted pick?
So I decided for the first one to stick close to home. This is a Boston-based haunted pick, and it's called the Granary Burying Ground. And this is very close to, if you're doing the Freedom Trail or you find yourself near Boston Common, it's just up the road from there, very, very close. So pretty much on the tourist track. And it has a number of famous residents. You got Paul Revere, got John Hancock, Sam Adams, Robert Payne, Ben Franklin's parents. There's like a big obelisk that says Franklin on it. A lot of people mistakenly think it's Ben, but it's his parents. And so even for that, it's got kind of this creepiness quality to it. But it is also, it has, it goes way, way back. It was founded, the original burial ground was in 1660. So it's gone through all of these ups and downs where, they used to barely bury the bodies there. They were only 2-3 feet under the ground. And there's these horrible histories of them. A big rain came and they'd be unearthed. And then you got human remains sloshing down the muddy street. And they eventually professionalized and started to pretty it up a little bit, but it still has that really, old colonial feeling, graveyard feel. And what's interesting about it is because it's in really the center of the city, it's surrounded very closely on all sides by really tall buildings. So you're almost always cast in shadow as you go through here. And I really like that it has a bunch of really creepy Halloween-esque iconography. So it's got skulls and grim reapers and the hourglass with the wings, that classic sort of colonial period graveyard marking. So it really puts you into the mood. People, had a little bit of fun with the way they would dress up their graves.
So wait a minute, there's actual like grim reapers on people's gravestones?
I'm saying Grim Reaper. What I really mean is they have like the skull with wings, or they have the skull with the crossbones underneath. No, there's not going to be the black robed, with a sickle creeper, unless you're there at the wrong time of day. I don't know. Maybe he comes and haunts. But there is one famous ghost that has taken up residency, and that's have you ever heard of the James Otis?
James Otis, is that a musician?
No, James Otis was a really prominent Boston lawyer. And basically he got into a bar fight and sustained some brain damage that made him very depressed. And the way the story goes is that he wrote a letter begging God to just put him out of his misery and to have him be struck by lightning. And lo and behold, he was struck by lightning, killed on the spot. And this is the lead ghost that people say. His body is interred at these the Granary burying grounds. And this is the lead ghost who people tend to see in the evenings among his fellow decomposing residents.
I like the idea of a lead ghost. there are some supporting characters, but he's really, it's about him.
Yeah. So next time you go, make a big thunderclap sound, give a big lightning sound, and then look around for James Otis.
Yeah, and then stand away from him. Yeah, because that's an unlucky man.
That is true. Well, or is he lucky? He wanted to be put out of his misery. I don't know.
Yeah. And now, well, there you go. I also have a cemetery on my list, Kiernan, the Magnolia Cemetery in Charleston, and I went during the pandemic, I did a Spirits of the Graveyard tour, and this was actually on Halloween of last year. So it's a pretty spooky thing to do on Halloween. And essentially, this is a cemetery from 1849. It's got a ton of Confederate soldiers that are buried there, local politicians, seedy characters from Charleston's underworld, like bootleggers and prostitutes and socialites. I like how socialites are listed there. One of the interesting things about this tour is, about the Hunley?
The Hunley? No, I don't. Oh, the Hunley is the submarine?
Exactly. The Hunley was a Confederate submarine that sunk in Charleston Harbor.
Which you can still see it preserved just outside Charleston.
Yeah, in 1864, this is when it sunk, and in 2004 they recovered most of the bodies and buried them in this cemetery. So pretty interesting.
Interestingly, on that too, if you want to go visit the submarine, they have it in a big pool. And in order to preserve it and not have the metal degrade, they have to drain the pool and fill it with this alkaline solution like once a week.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So it's very cool. I actually think it's on a naval base, if I'm not mistaken.
That's pretty cool. Well, I don't know that these soldiers haunt the Magnolia Cemetery, but the whole thing has that very Southern Gothic feel. And we were walking during the tour. The guide kept telling us to stay away from the little ponds because there might be snakes. And if I'd seen a snake, I would have actually been quite scared.
Sure, much more than a ghost.
Yeah, ghost snake especially. That would just be too much. So yeah, cemeteries are a really fun place to explore. During Halloween, the Halloween spooky time, I think.
I'll bring us home on the cemetery roundup here with one of my favorite cemeteries that I enjoy visiting cemeteries. In fact, you and we visited a cemetery, as you said, in Richmond. But it was like a beautiful fall day. It was almost more like a park visit.
That cemeteries were designed as the original parks.
Eventually, not in the 1660s. I think it was more in the 1700s. They started saying, let's bury these bodies a little deeper. Put a little more grass, a little less bones on the gravestones. By the time you get to James Hancock has a huge grave. You wouldn't. It fits the man. It fits the man's reputation.
It is a very funny grave. It's the biggest grave in the whole graveyard, I think.
By the way, hot Boston tip: if the graveyard is closed when you go and visit, you can still see Sam Adams right from the street. He's almost like right on. It's almost like they placed him close to the street for all of the eventual fans he would have. So you can still spot that one. You could see Franklin and Hancock too. I don't know that you really even need to go in. You do need to go in. It's beautiful.
And you wouldn't want to get trapped in a cemetery, right, Kiernan?
Oh boy, I've been trapped in a cemetery before, Ryan. I was locked in a cemetery. You got to watch that with cemetery tourism. Because they've got posted signs and then they just lock that gate. And, you could be stuck inside. Catherine and I were locked in way in the Upper West Side, like 150s. There's a giant cemetery. We were on the search for James Audubon's grave, which he has a fantastic grave, all with bird sculptures on it. And turned out we were in the wrong part of the cemetery, so we didn't even see it. We had to jump down off like an 8-foot wall to the street. It was horrifying.
That is horrifying.
But that's I've told that story for those who have dove deep into the archives. It's buried somewhere back there. The time I was locked in the cemetery. This cemetery that I want to talk about, I was not locked in. It was on a visit to New Orleans, and it's called St. Louis Cemetery Number 1, and it's the oldest. It's the oldest cemetery in New Orleans. Opened in 1789, and there because the water table is so high in New Orleans. It is completely built above the ground. So it's actually like, the premise of like a city of the dead. It's actually, you get the feeling of just like mausoleums and graves all around you because they're above the ground.
The above the ground mausoleums are the coolest things about those Southern graveyards.
I think so too. I'm very inspired by that James Madison one, I'm very inspired by that James Monroe one. It really has me thinking about my own resting place.
Yeah, I think you should look into getting a similar design. They 3D print it now, so it'd be much easier.
I mean, the New Orleans, of course, already has this like close relationship with the dead. They famously have the parades, the funeral parades, where they play loud, exciting jazz music. At Mardi Gras, it's almost like a Day of the Dead sort of celebration where people dress as skeletons, but often with really colorful costumes beyond that too. And St. Louis Cemetery is definitely part of that kind of New Orleans lore. And it's got similar that kind of like Southern Gothic feel about it. And I think the reason that people consider it haunted most especially is that it has one resident. Well, I'll tell you. First, I wanted you to know Nicolas Cage is eventually going to be interred at this cemetery. It's already been decided.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I don't think that's too spooky.
Yeah.
The spooky. I don't know.
I like the idea of just you go to the cemetery and you just see Nicolas Cage hanging out at his future grave.
Yeah. I mean, that would be very in keeping with his reputation.
Yeah.
No, the reason that this one's so interesting is, and I think it's associated with that kind of hauntedness, is there's a woman there who's buried named Marie Laveau. Now, does that name ring any bells?
It doesn't. Is she like a famous madam?
She's a famous practitioner of voodoo, the voodoo religion. I'm going to read to you what the memorial says. This Greek revival tomb is a reputed burial place of this notorious, quote, voodoo queen. A mystic cult voodooism of African origin was brought to the city from Santo Domingo and flourished in the 19th century. And Marie Laveau was the most widely known of the many practitioners of this cult. And so, anything associated with voodoo is going to have that good, fun, haunting feel about it. But any trip to New Orleans, you should make time to go to St. Louis, number one, whether during the day or if you dare at night.
New Orleans has got to be one of the most haunted cities in the country.
I agree. But, they've got, again, the Dia de los Muertos feel about it where they kind of have fun with that. So, yeah. I'm not too spooked.
No, don't be too spooked. What is spooky is the Devil's Tree in Bernards Township, New Jersey.
Yeah. Spooky Tree had me on the edge of my seat, but the full name of the town didn't really do it for me.
We've got this is a solitary oak tree all by itself in this field that locals tell us was planted by the devil themselves. And rumor has it that when it snows, it doesn't, you don't see the snow around the tree. There's a rock by it that if you touch it, it always feels unseasonably warm. And people think that is the gateway to hell. It's long been rumored to be a hangout for the KKK and for various cults. People have done bad things to the tree, cut it, or some people have urinated on it. And they've had tragedies and accidents happen after this. Might have been because they were drunk and they went up and peed on a tree and then drove away. But who knows, right? It could be the tree. So went to see the tree again during the pandemic. Not a lot to do outside, so it's a tree and you can drive to. Went to see the tree, and the whole time the radio had worked fine. But after we stopped at the tree and we took pictures and we touched the Devil's Rock and all these things, the radio did not work on the way home in the rental car.
Boy. Yeah. Wow.
So that was spooky, very spooky. And that is the Devil's Tree. And, when I touched the rock, I have to tell you, it felt more like a rock.
It didn't feel warm.
It didn't really feel. I mean, I tried to kind of convince myself it felt warm, but not really. Not really
like
warm.
A rock.
I like a rock. But that radio thing's real. So,
how long did it take till it came back? A couple minutes.
No, we returned the rental car without the radio.
Wow. Yeah. Did they charge you for that?
We were at the Devil's Tree. They're like, oh gosh, should have gotten that Devil's Tree insurance.
Yeah. Oh, there's a guy out there who just clips off antennas from cars. So I once I was driving a rental car and the antenna bent down, like it just kind of came out the wire. It was held by the wires. Yeah. So I just poked that guy right back in. Didn't get charged for it. I remember really sweating that one.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad you got one over and rent a car.
It might have been a ghost. So
Kiernan, do you have one final scary story to wrap this trip?
I do. First, I'm going to talk about kind of a category of stories. Then I'm going to share one of my favorites. So something that's I feel like vastly underappreciated is that there's tons of ghost stories and haunting stories to do with national parks. So
Serious
if you're heading to a national park. What? Oh, that's very true. It could be the follow-up to all those park murder podcasts that are so horrible out there. But it really does make sense because the parks are dark right? They get very dark because it's not like they're having streetlights all over the place. The whole point is to be out in nature. They're dark. They're dangerous. People die. They fall off cliffs. They get rocks fall on them. They drown. And so these legends kind of come up. And also there's these secluded communities that are often the gateways to the parks. And there's the people who work in the parks. There's their own little cultures. So the oral history passed down of all these deaths that have come and gone. These are the meat and potatoes of the ghost story industry.
What about bears?
Bears.
Bears. If somebody goes missing in a park, I'm going to bet on the bear before the ghost.
I haven't heard of any ghost bear stories, but I'll check back. That could be a recalculating. I bet there's one out there.
Yeah.
So this is, I feel like if you're a longtime listener to the show, when we talk about national parks, I have a whole laundry list of different resources and things you should consider checking out before you get there to have the best experience. Like, for example, checking out the state parks that are adjacent and often have the same nature, because nature doesn't know that the boundary of the national park stops here. State park starts there. But that's besides the point. What I would encourage you to do, if you enjoy a good haunting, a good ghost story, just Google whatever park you're going to with a ghost story. I guarantee you will find one. And so we'll link in the show notes to my favorite category of these is collected by the National Park Trust, posted a few Halloweens ago. And Ryan, I thought I would share one. When we ended up going to Richmond, we almost went to Mammoth Cave National Park. You remember that?
I do.
And of course, Mammoth Cave, because it's 400 miles of underground cave system, many people have died. It's dark. It's creepy inside. So, of course, there's ghost stories that are associated with it. All right. Well, the Mammoth Cave story, Ryan, it's a little gruesome.
Oh,
there's a cave explorer. His name is Floyd Collins.
They made a musical about this guy.
What do you mean?
Floyd Collins, the musical.
Is he a spelunker in the musical?
Yeah, it's called Floyd Collins by Tina Landrell. It's got Adam Gettle wrote it.
Oh my God! What?
And it has a great song called "How Glory Goes," where he's been falling in the pit and he sings, "Only heaven knows how glory goes."
I gotta guess this is a different Floyd Collins.
Really?
I think so, because this guy didn't fall. He got crushed. He got crushed by a giant boulder falling and pinning him. In
Cave City, Kentucky?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is it. The life and death of Floyd. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I don't remember the exact.
Oh, boy, we got to put a link to that, folks. We know you're not musical fans, and we did not plan this. I had no idea there was a musical about this ghost. Well, this guy gets pinned by a boulder. He thinks people are going to come and save him. 4 days go by, and finally a second rockfall does him in. And so there's tons of accounts that his spirit is still wandering throughout the caves. And, these are the risks you take, falling rocks and ghosts. That's cave exploration.
Yeah, I mean, caves are spooky to begin with. So if I was a ghost, I feel like I'd be very comfortable down there.
There's another one in here that I won't get too far into, but Great Sand Dunes National Park, which is this fantastic, very strange park of sand dunes with mountains behind them. Beautiful, beautiful park. This doesn't fall into the ghost category, but there's a lot of UFO and alien sightings out there.
Ooh, that's. We should do a whole episode on alien sites.
Yeah, that's good. I like it a lot. Aliens themselves, I find, I believe in aliens a lot more than I do ghosts.
Yeah, no, I hope to see an alien one day if I haven't already.
Look for those national park ghost stories, and Ryan, I'll get back to you on that ghost bear.
Yeah, let's do it. And for now, I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
Ooh, that was spooky, especially that musical theater part.
We know our audience just clicked turn off right there. Famously, our worst performing episode, How to Book Tickets to Broadway.
Yeah.
We had some good tips in there.
There's some good tips in there, folks.
People like going to Broadway.
Yeah.
You hear Leah Michelle getting all those rave reviews.
Oh, I hear it's incredible.
It kills me. She's not a great person, folks.
No.
Well, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show. That's why that's in the name there. It's the final segment of the show. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the People segment. And that's because we invite others in, not to contribute. Ryan and I have got that covered. Please don't send us your materials. Not to contribute, but to listen to be part of the community, to let Ryan and I share a piece of ourselves with you. It's a quieter moment in the show, a moment of rest before we go our separate ways, in hopes that you'll come on back for the next episode and give us a good review in Apple, by the way, please. And Ryan, it could be anything that you and I bring. We could share a review in this if we wanted to, especially if it had a travel story in it. But it could be a site, it could be a memory, it could be a piece of gear, could be a book, an article, could be somebody you chatted with, could be something you overheard. But there is one thing it has to do. It has to inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So Ryan, I have to ask you, as I ask you every episode, even on the spooky episodes, do you have a last stop this week?
I do. In keeping with sort of the spooky mystery theme of the pod today, do you know about the Georgia Guidestones?
No, I don't. Is that a band?
No, it would be a good band. But in the late 1970s and 1979, a man known only as R.C. Christians went to Georgia, about 100 miles east of Atlanta, and built these massive 4 stone pillars that had rules for humanity on them. And, you know, they're weird rules: unite humanity with a living new language, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. I mean, like, really kind of strange things. They've been criticized and dissected by, you know, every possible, the left and the right. You know, nobody can agree what these sort of stones mean, and we've never actually figured out who bought them and had them made and put them up. But they've been up since 1979, and then back in July, they were actually blown up. They were completely destroyed by a bomber who has never been caught. But someone blew up these Georgia Guidestones, and they no longer exist. So we don't know who put them there. You know, we don't really know what they meant, and we don't know who destroyed them. So a lot of mystery.
What an insane story.
Yeah, a lot of mystery in these Georgia Guidestones. I had heard about them years ago on like one of those Stuff You Should Know podcasts. And, you know, because it's a fun story, like, who is this and what are they about? And I'd always hoped to be able to, you know, to see them. But now they've been destroyed.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss, Ryan.
Well, you know.
Well, Ryan, I did feel the need for a Halloween-themed final stop. Final stop? Last stop. God, we gotta keep the branding consistent here. Last stop. And now you and I are working on an episode that we're going to do all around Edgar Allan Poe tourism. So I don't want to give it too far away, but I do think Edgar Allan Poe is, you know, he's renowned, one of the best resources for actually creepy short stories and reading and writing. And I enjoy a Poe. Do you enjoy a Poe story?
Oh, I had a teacher, Miss Mitchell, when I was in 6th and 7th grade. She was our homeroom teacher, and she would read The Telltale Heart like really dramatically every Halloween, and it was like my favorite thing.
Interesting. Well, the thing I wanted to talk about was that I'm sure we'll revisit this on the Poe episode, but it belongs here in Halloween, is Edgar Allan Poe actually has 2 graves, which seems fitting.
They cut him in half?
No, he's not a magician, Ryan. He's a horror story writer. No, he was originally interred and then he was moved. And so the original grave, which I quite like, it's much more understated, is in Baltimore, and has the basic information on him, but it also has a really subtle bird on the top. It doesn't quite look like a raven to me, but it gestures at the raven, which I think is the most important thing. So if you find yourself in Baltimore this Halloween, certainly go and pay a visit to the original burial place of Edgar Allan Poe. But his final burying place, which he was moved to in 1875, is a much grander monument. It's got his face on it. It's got all this ornamentation and the harps. I think it's a little more over the top. But, he was an over-top writer, so maybe this is fitting. And the story there is that for years, a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe used to come in on his birthday. They would sneak into the burial ground and they would put 3 roses and a bottle of French cognac on the grave. And I'll link to an article about this. Still has never been caught, this quiet, sneaky person who came in to praise Edgar Allan Poe. So a little extra mystery. Maybe Poe's still around with us. We'll get a 3rd grave.
Ooh, I want somebody to leave cognac on my grave every year.
I mean, I can give you, I don't know, I'll bring a Sam Adams.
What are we talking about next week, Kiernan?
Next week, we are doing a return trip to a popular episode, a great episode in our National Park series, the lesser known national parks. I actually think, if I recall correctly, I believe Great Sand Dunes, which I was talking about with the UFOs, is talked about in that episode.
That's one where you can go skiing down the sand.
That's exactly the one.
Oh,
yeah.
so cool.
Not exactly skiing, you sled.
Sledding down the sand.
Yes.
Either way.
It's a great episode. And then the week after that, we're going to do our first joint city guide, where we each are sharing the burden of carrying us through. Not a burden, the joy of spreading the story of a city. I mean, there's a reason we do it, folks. So we'll be talking about Richmond the following week.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to unpacking the trip. There's a lot to talk about. Well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, your spooky Halloween podcast.
This seat taken. Ryan, are you a Frankenstein man, a zombie man, a mummy man, a Dracula man? Who are you on?
I'm a vampire man.
Vampire man. Yeah, they're sexy men. I figured you might be.
Folks,
I like the mummy.
It'll be really
I'm a fan of the
scary.
mummy.
Folks, it'll be really scary if you don't get out and vote. Go vote.
Oh, boy. Shut that in.